Welcome to another episode of AI After Hours. Each month, we cut through the AI hype by answering your top questions and calling bullshit on the headlines we just don't think make sense. Join us for a monthly roundup of AI news and real insight into what's true and what's not in the world of artificial intelligence. Have a question or topic? Email us to join the conversation. That's support@aicareerboost.com. Let's dive into the world of AI together.
I'm your co-host, Yuying Chen-Wynn, a product and technology executive with extensive experience in AI and education. I'm currently leading Applied AI at Peak 6, focusing on everything generative AI and actually understanding what it means to leverage AI meaningfully to your business. And I really love talking about AI, especially with my co-host, Polly Allen.
That's me. I'm your other co-host, Polly Allen, and I'm the founder of AI Career Boost, where I spend my time helping product leaders navigate the world of AI and transition into AI leadership roles. I've spent my career in both the product and the software development worlds, and I'm the ex-Alexa AI Principal Product Manager, and I led the first generative AI answers on Alexa back in 2020. I also love chatting about AI, especially with Yuying. So let's jump into it, Yuying. What are you drinking tonight?
So I got something fun. It's lightly purple. I don't know if you can tell, but it's an ube and coconut beer, which sounds like it could be horribly wrong, but it's really good. You're just gonna trust me, and if you're ever in LA, I'll tell you where to go get some. What about you?
You always have the most unusual drinks. That's amazing. Ube and coconut. It sounds like a weird beer fest beer, but I'm still into it.
Awesome. And
I I have a very light ginger ale, dark. It looks dark. It's called a dark and stormy if it's like
oh,
ginger ale, ginger beer with rum, right? But
oh,
because I use light rum and light ginger ale, it's like a spring. It's
it's a light storm.
light and springy.
It's a light storm, not a big storm. Unlike our news this
Spring
month.
storm. Oh, well, let's get into
Yeah,
that.
let's get into that. Okay, boy, I was gonna, middle of the month, I was like, May is a little bit light, and lo and behold, Google I/O happens, and because Google is gonna announce something, everybody else has to announce something, and we have a packed news. But I'm gonna squish it down and focus on what we think matters, because we have a lot of bone to pick with people announcing things that you cannot access, cannot use, and cannot verify. Just putting that up at the front. So, all
It's true.
right,
I love that.
okay,
Let's stick to the things you can actually get your hands on.
yeah.
Fair.
So, for those of you who don't know what Google I/O is, it is their annual developer conference where they announce a lot of capabilities for those that are building on the Google platform, most notably Android if you're a mobile developer, on top of the Google Search or Gemini for AI. Now, this one just happened and they announced a whole host of things, many of which have project names that you have no idea what it does when you hear about it. Project Astra, for example. What is that? I don't know. A lot of things that you cannot access: image FX, video FX, music FX. You can guess, but I don't want to go to it until we can actually access it. I think the more practical ones, they're announcing Gemini integration into Workspace and Gmail. Wow, I get so
Right.
much email getting it summarized. Hopefully, it does it well. Problem is, I don't have access. But that one, I'm actually excited enough to talk about it, even though it's not available
Yeah.
publicly yet. I am not going to go through all that was announced. I think there was also a big focus in terms of just enabling AI on the phone on Android as well. But the demos, they are not grabbing me. So let me ask you, Polly, of all the Google, there's a slew of announcements. There's a list of 100 if you wanted to go into. Anything catch your eye?
I think I had the same issue you had with like a lot of these are like coming soon. Look how cool this is going to be. I'm still very, we've all been stung by these demos before, so I think we all need to take that. Like, I'll believe it when I see it. Let me touch it. Let me feel it before I'm really into anything. One of the ones that stuck out to me was they're announcing a 2 million context window instead of one
Ooh,
million with
is bigger
Gemini.
better, Polly?
Again, right? We asked this several months ago. Does size matter? I mean, it just seems like this was like the competition they thought they were in 6 months ago, and they're just continuing it. Like if 1 million tokens is the size of the Harry Potter series, right? Most places that are trying to use large corpuses of documents, they're not going to insert the full set of that document's context into the prompt and pay for those tokens on each turn. So they're going to use retrieval augmented generation. That's the pattern everyone's following right now. So who's this bigger context for? So I don't know. I'm like, if you're expecting Claude to come out with 3 million, it's almost with 4 million. Maybe they'll continue on this, but this seems like research driven at this point, because Google had said, "Oh, this is on our mission to get to infinite context." If that doesn't also go along with like, and will drive the cost to zero for every token that you use, it's kind of useless,
Yeah.
right? It helps you build chatbots quickly, but nothing you would actually use in production.
That's the thing. I can't actually use it in production. We've had some cool use cases, but you know what? We're rate limited to 5 calls per minute. Now, if you try to have a
Right.
conversation, yeah, I put it in production, I pulled it out because I got rate limited within the first minute. So, unless it's actually
Wow.
available for people to use, we're not even going to discover those use cases. Okay.
Yeah, and I think that was my impression that it's like all the companies now are in this phase where they're like, instead of launch, and none of the launches were as big as like when they first launched the custom GPT store or something, right? Like it's kind of they were launching new video capabilities, can't see them yet. Of the things we can touch, it's like it's faster, it's cheaper, there's less rate limiting. They're like trying to bring things out of the world of being a toy and not introducing as many new shiny objects into, okay, now how do we make this useful in the real world? Which I get, it just makes for like a really boring announcement,
Yeah.
right?
So what I'm hearing from you, which is how I feel, 100 announcements, but we're not excited because number one, we
Yeah.
can't touch the fun stuff, and the stuff that we can get to, underwhelms. So Google,
It's still
do
not,
better.
yeah, it's still not at a point where we're actually going to, it's going to be like it's at the tipping point of driving this to be like the killer use case for anything
Yeah, exactly.
in the real world.
All right. So what we now know happens with these major hyperscalers, when one makes big announcements, somebody else has to as well to try to trump it. And ChatGPT, sorry, excuse me, OpenAI had to pre-announce before Open IO came out. I don't know if you noticed, there was the 4.0, there was a Mac desktop app, there's an Android app, there's GPT Store being open to free users. And
That's cool.
yeah, so I wanted to ask you which one, did you think any of this kind of top Google announcements and actually excited you?
Well, I kind of tipped my hand that I was like, oh, the one thing that I didn't know if they were going to do for sure was actually open up the custom GPT store beyond Chat GPT Plus users. I did think they were trying to drive adoption of Chat GPT Plus with their custom GPTs. Like, look at all, you can't get access to this app store unless you pay $20 a month. That isn't the model for most app stores. So I guess it makes sense that you're like, oh, we want to give the builders access to all these customers, our real big audience, which is the free users, really.
Yeah.
So it does make sense. What's interesting is the building piece is still, of course, just open to Plus users. And the crazy thing with the custom GPT builder is like it really locks you in. The only place you can actually expose that custom GPT you build is on the GPT store. If you want to build something that can go elsewhere, you have to switch it over to the assistants, and the assistants you have to do a lot.
Yeah,
There's
it's
not
a
as much
lot of
built-in
work.
support. Exactly. It's very different from building from mocking up a custom GPT. You can't just copy the prompt over, use the same documents. It won't act the same,
Yeah.
right? And they have some secret sauce that is going into those custom GPTs under the hood. So it's clear that they're trying to make everyone want to just develop custom GPTs. Only use the GPT store as the place where you interact with them. It's a good move. I don't love a future where we're locked into one provider for like all the world's chatbots as like the interface. Even just like how we're locked into the interface controls, what you can really build with it. I can see a future where they build out a whole suite where you can have a lot more control over the UX. So
Yeah.
that's gonna be interesting. That's probably the path they're on. Come here to build anything, any AI generated app, and share it on our store. I don't know. It just seems like it's another place where we're looking for that we're seeing that consolidation down to like only a few companies having most of the control over this market. It's kind
Yeah,
of crazy.
absolutely. I agree with you that the GPT store being available, not GPT store, the custom GPTs being available to the free
Yeah.
users was a very exciting thing because I love anything that increases the access of AI to the
Right.
much larger population, the whole democratization piece. I love that aspect. That one is meaningful. The other one, GPT-4o, they announced a new model is immediately available, and the main thing, it's cheaper and faster. I'm like, sign me up. And it was
Yeah.
available the same day through API, through the UI, although the desktop app, I think, maybe took like a few days. But
I still don't have it, and I'm a Plus member, a long time Plus member.
I
I'm
got
a
it.
little annoyed about
I
that.
got
So,
it.
oh,
So
you did?
yeah, I'm a little
Okay.
cooler
I'm
than
like,
you today. No, just kidding. But
how do I
yes,
get on the
for
list you
me,
use?
there was less flash, but I actually liked the OpenAI announcements better this time than what Google was coming out. And
Yeah.
we know Microsoft is going to come out with something. We don't know yet by the time of this recording, but we will definitely update you guys on the other one next time. Okay, I gotta.
Yeah, it's literally happening while we speak, I
Yep.
think.
All right, I gotta cover a few more news. We're gonna just cram it
Okay.
in. One of the things that OpenAI has been doing is these partnerships. Now, I want to call out the Stack Overflow one because code use is one of the most popular uses. So Stack Overflow is going into a partnership with OpenAI so they can train on the
Yeah.
code and comments. But what I found interesting is that the users are rebelling. There are Stack Overflow users who are deleting the answers so ChatGPT can't train. And
Mhm.
Stack Overflow are banning those users for rebelling. I'm like, wait, what? Okay,
Wait. Yeah.
sorry, I gotta pull back my opinion here. Polly, what was your reaction?
Uh, you seem like you're a wild fan of this
Yeah,
this approach.
extreme.
No, like who turns on their users? Especially a content platform like that,
Yeah,
where like you depend on your users.
they're the
That's your whole
content, right?
value.
It's not yours, it's theirs.
Yeah.
Why would
That's
you?
nuts.
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
like, the first, I'm like, good, go towards where you actually get permission to use the content. But if the user is choosing no, then why would you? Oh, yeah, anyway, so
Banning them. Yeah. No, that's brutal.
yeah. So I had to highlight that when I think in general, OpenAI is going in a good direction to get partnerships for content, so they have license because they have to wade through this issue. But yeah, it was interesting
Yeah.
reaction on Stack Overflow, and I'm definitely against that. Okay, so that one was super quick. The next one is more of an overall one, even though it highlights a particular AI startup. So here's the news: is AI startups in general. We know they got huge amounts of VC money pouring in, but they're starting to find out they're not really making the revenue. So in terms of profitability,
Huh.
what is happening, which may not surprise you, is AI startups are turning to enterprise offerings to get revenue. As unsexy as it is, that is what they're shifting towards. Now, I
Yeah.
definitely had my own take on it, but Polly, what do you think of that news?
Yeah, well, and I think there's a lot of I think we could look back and see that this is a common cycle for things to start out as like a consumer thing, really highly commoditized. Like it starts it becomes really highly commoditized at the consumer level, and they're like, okay, how do we make this more valuable for people who are doing something where this tool actually doesn't just save you 5 minutes or time, it actually saves you dollars. Like you can calculate ROI. Now we can sell it to a business, right? So that path isn't surprising to go to consumer to enterprise. And then I can see you can see some of the other players like Claude and other people trying to play catch up, right? Everyone always compares OpenAI to other providers like Anthropic and saying like, oh well, here's the models. Let's look at our benchmarks. You know how much we love benchmarks. It's like the be all end
Oh
all.
yeah, that's I'm
Um,
all for.
but the tools around the models, OpenAI is like so far ahead. I remember I saw an announcement from Claude, and they're like, "We have a team offering." I was like, "What?" Just now they have a team offering. Didn't occur to me to look, but of course they do. But they're like, OpenAI's had that for months, right? They've got a team offering, they've got an enterprise offering. They've got small teams, and then of course they've got Microsoft is the power of integrating the tools and the co-pilots there. So it just seems like all that whole big ecosystem around it is going to be the place that the enterprise game is won. And I think that some of these companies that were behind OpenAI to market are like, well, maybe we can win the enterprise market, but
Yeah.
I don't know. OpenAI seems pretty ahead there too.
So they're definitely trying to emulate what OpenAI is doing, but I will say what OpenAI they're testing the waters. The business model has not figured out it. So I talk to a lot of AI startups all day, looking at both purchase and use internally, and I can tell you by far they have no idea how to actually price and set the business model for enterprise. A lot of them are
Yeah.
going, hey, I used to be 20 per user per month for consumer, so your enterprise, I'm 40, or we'll negotiate, and if you buy, 500, then we'll take it down to 35. I'm like, you know, per user per.
Right.
I'm like, do you realize that number one, you just outpriced yourself over the entire Google suite that I purchased for the company? You're gonna tell me you're better than an entire productivity suite? But
Right.
yeah, so it's the shift is inevitable. The pricing business
Yeah.
model, they're trying to figure it out. OpenAI has a head start, but what they're doing is not the endpoint yet, guys. So there is room for the business minds to come in and figure this out at the enterprise level that actually makes sense for all of
And I
us.
think what I worry about is that like the people with deep, deep pockets are going to price things super low, trying to get like the larger market share, hoping that they'll get to the point that they'll have like lock in and then they can raise their prices later. Because otherwise, I'm like, I don't know how anybody's going to make some money, right? Right now, I looked at the pricing for Google Gemini. So forget the enterprise use case. The same thing will happen though. And Google Gemini's pricing is like 10 times lower than anybody else's. And I was like, oh, okay, Google's like, that'll be our thing, right? Hey, come experiment on us or whatever,
Yeah.
and or like once you've experimented on OpenAI, come use us for production because we're 10 times cheaper. We're actually going to provide the ROI you need, kind of thing. So it's really like who can afford to go the longest at the lowest price. It's going to be great for consumers in the short run, but if it really again points to that consolidation again, right? No one can afford to compete with them unless you have masses of GPUs that you've already bought, access to the lowest prices on that, and a stockpile of cash to burn on this for a while. So again, I get depressed because it feels like it points to like, man, there's really only going to be these few big companies playing in this space. Except for, of course, enterprise people are working out how to do things like on their own personal cloud. Not necessarily even they're migrating away from the service providers too,
Oh,
just
you mean
because they're so concerned
on-prem?
about their data, right? Yeah. So more on-prem or private cloud, like not cloud providers, and using the open source. So I think that's like
Yeah.
that's our hope.
So
Obi-Wan, Alma
definitely,
3,
yeah, definitely AI in the
you're a shining
B2B
hope.
space is shifting. We have to keep an eye out, and no one has it figured out. And yeah, the deep pockets might be the only ones who survive. And if it's a, an acquisition and merge play, maybe we'll see. Okay, so that one we'll keep an eye out. It's not a single news for sure. It's gonna be a trend.
Yeah,
All
it's a
right.
trend.
Lastly, and most importantly, you know how we like to focus on news here that's truly impactful, truly innovative, and truly memorable. Polly knows where I'm going with this. And since both of us are from MIT, we
Yeah.
have to highlight the best MIT project that we've seen coming
Oh
out using
yes.
AI, which is from the MIT CSAIL and Project City team. You know what they've discovered with machine learning, Polly? They have discovered that sperm whales have an alphabet in their communication, and this was done using machine learning. So they do have a
Finally,
yeah,
something useful this week,
exactly. No, it blows my mind. Sperm whales have an alphabet. Do you think they sing the ABC song? I need to know what that song is. Or
right?
Baby
Are
Shark
we finally going to be able to talk to animals? Talk to the animals.
We're gonna have a Baby Shark version. We're just gonna connect that model with Suno, and we're gonna generate Baby Shark in sperm whale alphabet and send it. Okay.
Prize for the most obscure AI project.
No,
I
it's
love it.
it's the best. And with that, we are wrapped up on our monthly news update with a perfect lead over to you, Polly. What do you got?
The top. So thanks for the news. That's great. So I'm going to dive into some of the top burning questions this week. I'm actually going to, I think I'm going to keep it to one because it's kind of a biggie and I wanted to dive in a little deeper sometimes. So as I'm teaching courses in AI for product leaders, I often get the question from folks from smaller companies who are like, hey, all this AI stuff is great. Obviously, like we talked about, there's consolidation with the big players, the foundation models. But for us as a small company, especially if we don't have a lot of AI in-house talent, etc., it sounds like to actually make anything really work, we're going to need PhDs who can fine tune models for us, like at least fine tune the models. And I was really shocked by this take because I actually feel like the advent of LLMs and the kind of democratization of access to them, it's the biggest boon is actually to small businesses. And you're like, oh man, no, not only can you really easily accelerate internal use cases and go find those, and then the obvious low hanging fruit like customer support or marketing, but building products based on this is now easier than ever before. You do have to worry about your lunch being eaten by these big guys because they keep coming along and saying like, oh, okay, we're going to make it easier to do XYZ use case on our platform. But they're never going to go after the super, super niche like things or be able to really market well and support well, in
I
different
think should we kind
niches.
of define what fine tuning is a little bit first? Just
Yeah, and it again, it's because people get confused. There's you can give a model a lot of context in the context window in the prompts, right? Like we talked about this 2 million token size context. Give it the whole series of Harry Potter twice over. But that's different from actually changing, updating the model. So in that case, you give it lots and lots of examples for your use case. Like if the user says this, I want you to say this. You get all of those examples, and you actually change them, update the model. So that same pre-training they've done on the model, you do more of it to actually change how the model answers. You get a totally different version of the model when you do this. It actually changes the weights. But the interesting thing is, people have made a big deal about fine tuning, like being this big solution. And I've had students working on with it for over a year. There are some no code ways, by the way, to tune models. Particularly, OpenAI has
right.
some great easy walkthroughs where you can actually just here's how to make your data set. Here's this format it needs to be in. Upload it, fine tune your model.
Hmm.
But the results aren't that great. Like when we couldn't fine tune GPT-4 and all we had access to was even models before GPT 3.5, people were freaking out like, oh man, I can't wait to fine tune these things. Once we could, it really seemed like prompting was much more powerful in terms of getting the output that you want. And you can give it instructions and really get it to like 95%. If you have a use case where you need to be 98%, it helps tweaking those last 3%, but it's not the big powerful lever in getting the behavior you want out of models that people think. And so especially for small companies, I keep advising people you can get a long way with prompting, as long as you're not picking these use cases that have to have super super high accuracy. But I'd love to hear if that's your experience too, Yuying.
Yeah, so I think what happens is number one, they get suggested fine tuning a lot by technology providers. And let
Yes.
me just tell you, the technology providers are suggesting it because number one, it requires expertise. Number two, it takes compute, which means just in general, they're trying to make more money. That's all I'm saying, right? If
Yeah.
there's different ways of doing this, the one that seems fancier and costs more, the ones who are selling you the technology and service is going to recommend that one. And I find that quite a bit. Now, the second one to kind of remember in terms of fine tuning or not, think about the model itself, what it was trained on. It's something a couple of I think some of them are up to like 1 trillion tokens in terms of what it's trained on. That means what you're adding on top has to be at least somewhat big enough to move the dial of how it behaves.
Right.
So if you think about just
Yeah.
relatively, do you really have that much data that behaves differently than what it would naturally do with some guidance with using your RAG or prompting? So the couple of fields where it matters, where it is so specific, medical field, for example, right? There's
Yeah.
some really in-depth stuff in there. Those definitely you should fine tune, but the ones that are like that, there are companies focused on doing that because it is
Yeah.
highly skilled work with expertise required. It is not something that small businesses would take on. This is the kind of thing that major organizations, kind of conglomerates of different data banks together can do a good job. Medical, definitely, for one, you will see that quite well. And the other thing I would just remind you, ever think about fine tuning again? If you remember in the financial space, Bloomberg GPT came out pretty early, right? Those
Yeah.
guys have data. Oh,
And they built their own from scratch.
they have data. They have enough. When we say like, do
Yeah.
they have enough data to actually
Right.
shift it? So where are they? If that was going to be so amazing and so great for finance, where is it? Why can't we buy it? Why can't we?
Exactly. I think they do continue. I've definitely heard they continue to use it internally, but I think the biggest takeaways were a lot of folks thought afterwards, oh, the speed of open source is moving so quickly. They probably could have simply taken an open source model and fine tuned it and gotten similar results to them building it from absolute scratch, right? And yeah, they clearly had ambitions to be like financial use cases. Come to us, we'll be the Chat GPT of finance, and that's like nowhere, right? We haven't seen it yet.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I agree. No, thanks for that. The other area I think that fine tuning makes sense is if you have really structured outputs, like having something fine tuned for code, which exists third party, you don't have to do that. Or like if you're doing something where you want the output to be structured like XML or JSON, right? But again,
But
this is something that
already
Chat that
done.
OpenAI is working on. Like so I guess in conclusion, I think you agree with me on this, like, hey, small companies, please don't get intimidated or worried about the whole fine tuning situation. Do dive into how much you can do with prompting and solving users' problems with that. Because I think you can get a long way and the tech barriers are simply so much lower than they used to be. So this is not a big company's game anymore. And fine tuning is really just the last few miles to getting to super high accuracy in use cases.
Yeah.
It's not for that first step of like, hey, can we get things done using this? So
Yeah.
don't be afraid to dive in.
Definitely where the longer context windows will actually help if you're really specific in your content.
Yeah, exactly. If you want to give it further
Yeah.
instructions. Awesome. So that's the end of questions for today.
Ooh.
What's next, Yu Ying?
Oh my gosh, I don't know. Could it be my favorite section of all podcasts of all time?
I always like that it comes after a little bit of our drink, right?
Yep, yep. And it always
It's
comes
always
after
better
like the
after
really
you.
big questions, the hard ones. We're like, okay, fine tuning versus prompting. All right, yeah, okay. It's how we've structured this to be fun. So BS and AI, my favorite section of
Yes.
all podcasts of all time. This is where we kind of cut through whether it's headlines or just general beliefs that we think it's absolutely BS, misunderstood, misconception, or just outright lies. Okay, so my pick for this month. I don't know if it's a soapbox or just a rant. It might just be a rant. All right.
Okay.
A,
Bring it.
anybody see my air quotes? AI experts.
Yep.
What's my AI experts? So I know. Speaking as a self-acclaimed AI expert right here.
That's the worst part. How do we not call bullshit on ourselves?
So the AI experts that are highlighted out there, and of course, LinkedIn is really what I'm complaining about with a lot of like, okay, head of AI expert, machine learning expert, generative AI expert. And if you look at job descriptions, top skills, even in the Stanford AI Index report, the top skill they're looking for is generative AI. I'm like, how, what kind of
What is that
what
skill
is that skill?
exactly?
So I have met, sorry, I have not met, I have looked through LinkedIn profiles of heads of AI where you're tracking down, go machine learning expertise. Where do they have that? Gosh, I don't actually see them building anything with machine learning or doing a model or even being a data scientist. Somehow, somewhere from software engineering, there's suddenly machine learning and head of AI and an AI expert at an AI authority and a top voice. Generative AI. Now, absolutely cool if you're building with APIs,
Yeah.
totally level of expertise of
And I think that
applied.
like that's a skill and it has its own
Yeah,
expertise, right? And it's new. Like there's no one who was really like not that many people who were super into that
yeah,
a couple of years ago. So I have more leeway if people call themselves like a generative AI expert and
yeah,
who's actually built anything, right, with it. As I'm like
yeah.
they have more credit than a lot of people
Yep.
in my
No,
eyes.
exactly. Maybe I'm kind of splitting hairs here, but look, if you understand what the state of AI is and maybe how to set AI strategy, call it that. You're not a
Right.
AI across the across the board expert, and I'm gonna come for you. I'm just gonna hammer you with 3 questions, and if you can't answer me, then I'm sorry. I'm not saying I do that, but maybe I do. But I think my point is, in terms of
Yeah.
authorities on AI or AI experts,
Yeah.
a lot of people do have a lot of knowledge and very different. But please separate who actually has a technical know-how. And you don't need that deep, but to build the actual models, to be able to do
Yeah.
traditional machine learning versus they're just calling an API, which is totally valid, but separate those capabilities. Those who
Right.
understand the risks, the governance, versus those who actually can fix it. Like, right? So when we talk about all this data issues and et cetera, I think a lot of people get more into the governance piece of what it needs to do versus actually being able to fix it. So AI expertise. I know my default is going to be ask someone you actually trust as to parse out an AI expert's background for you.
Yeah.
I've seen some people like, I got an MIT PhD and they're going to be all things, all AI for me. And I'm like, oh, cool. Those guys are, boy, they're super smart. I look at the guy's background. I'm like, he was a mechanical engineer. And
Right. Not
MIT people are
not
super smart.
smart, but it's
I'm sure he could do it, but I'm like, but you're generating animations. So I'm not saying he can't do it. I'm just saying. But
yeah. It's so hard to tease apart right now. And I do think it's very different, especially as so many like tradition like that when deep tech had like AI specialists, right? That meant one thing. But now that basically everyone is like, I want to build some kind of AI based product, right? I do think there's experts in building on top of AI APIs, and that they should call themselves generative AI experts, and like that makes sense. But if they call themselves machine learning experts,
yeah,
right? Or they are like, that I'm all of a
yeah,
sudden
I
like,
really
I need
can't do
to
that.
wait,
Yep.
right? Yeah, exactly. And it's just there should be this distinction, because I think we're going to find more and more that people are saying, oh, wait, like, do we use an LLM for all of these things? What's the trade off with using traditional models? That's potentially a different person than the person who is amazing at go to market or matching generative AI capabilities to user problems, and actually being able to build things with the APIs and things that have been democratized, versus understanding the nuances of like, hey, how do we make this super secure? How do we make this super efficient and efficient enough to deliver ROI? You might need people with a little more technical background there. And yeah,
Yeah,
there's just no
exactly.
distinction right now. Everyone's just, the worst part is people are lying.
That
That's the
that's
part
the
that
that's the
really
part. And not to
yeah.
toot our own horns, but I am going to. But Polly, you actually built before there was an API to call for
Yeah.
generative AI for language, and very specifically, you and I actually specialize in language AI, which is not the same thing as every other AI out there, right? I did a
Yeah.
little bit of image recognition, vision, computer vision, image processing way back in the day, and the technology has shifted. I did a little robotics way back in the day, completely different.
Yeah.
But so, right, you and I've also actually built AI around NLP languages before there was an API to call. So I had to collect my own freaking data. Right? We had to
Yeah.
train,
Exactly.
tune for children's voices. We had to tune for different sample data, etc. So very different. Not calling ourselves experts on everything, but on the language AI piece that
Right. Language
transforms
and
into
search.
generative AI and those things. Yeah, we actually know what we're doing. No.
Maybe that's a good tip. Is like, if someone's calling themselves an expert, a deep expert in generative AI, you should ask like, so which piece do you specialize in? Because no one can be a specialist in everything, right? There's too much out
Yeah,
there.
it's
So if they continue to
incredibly
talk
deep
vaguely,
expertise. Like it's so deep. Yeah.
good one.
Okay,
Okay,
so
so
all right,
AI experts.
I'm gonna calm down. All right, I'm gonna calm down.
That's
Polly,
just so I can
you're
rile you up
yeah. So
again.
you could run. So what's your bullshit to call this?
My bullshit this week. I literally just found out about this, but it made me super angry. So apparently, Facebook has done this a couple times now, and I'm sure
Meta,
other
meta,
social platforms. Pardon?
meta.
Sorry, Meta. I'm old. Um, the so it's happened a couple times now that people who are using forums and like groups on Facebook, right, that are looking for answers to expertise. There was an example of parents who were looking for advice, like, hey, does anyone else on this forum have experience in the New York healthcare system for kids that are both disabled and gifted, right? As an example, right? And like, we've got this particular thing. We're looking for our community to connect and find other people to help us. And someone replied saying like, oh, actually, yeah, we're in the 2E program, which is the double excellence program they have in the school system for specifically for that case. Here's our experience. It turned out it was actually a bot. So misrepresenting themselves as a person in the chat,
Oh.
right? And it's popped up on these like buy and seller forums and things like that. So where people are like, oh
Oh.
yeah, I have a blah blah blah, and it's like it turns out it's a bot, like a meta bot, not just a third
Oh.
party bot, but that Meta has enabled by default in your groups this
Oh.
these
That's the.
automated responses. And it's like a really I mean, it's a metric first minded approach to say like, oh well, how do we keep engagement up? One of the problems in groups is that people ask questions, they don't get a response, things kind of die out. So they only answer a question if no one's
If we,
answered for an hour,
but it.
right? So they're like,
But can you
but
tell there
yeah, the
was a?
key is it wasn't clear to people that this
Like.
was AI generated. And so the part that really, part that really bums me out is that Meta went with this and did it as like an opt out feature. So
Yeah.
they rolled it out and made group admins have to opt out of this feature. Meta knows better. Like they've been through the ringer. Like when these companies are new and they go and they are like, let's move fast and break things, you expect some things like this. And OpenAI kind of has a hall pass right now in that respect, right? People are
Yeah.
so in love with the new advancements that they're going to let them break things. But Meta, once you've been through the ringer, it's kind of like how Microsoft went through all of the lawsuits, back 20
Yep.
years ago. And now they're like, oh, we actually like we behave like a grown-up company because we know the pain of these kinds of things. And I just feel like Meta not being careful with its user base in being super transparent at all times. I mean, it just seems like wrong-headed to have done this anyway because people are there to connect with other people
Yeah.
and get like real experience
Because
from
that's
other
that's the
people.
thing, right? So there are use cases for groups where this is valuable. Because I'm
Yeah.
in like Chat GPT or Midjourney prompt kind of groups where people are like, hey, how do you do this thing? For a bot to chime in and be like, oh, hey, I totally know how to do that, and to answer is great because maybe people are not paying
Yeah.
attention, and you really need to know how to do this thing. But number one, identify it as the bot. In this case, I'm like, oh, cool. If someone answered, a bot answered how to do things, I would totally trust it because it's a bot. It should know. But when you do it wrong, you misrepresent it. You kind of just kill the tech for people who are exposed to it the first time, and all they feel
Yeah.
like is you're here to trick me, right? And the
Yeah.
moment your technology is like people are like they're just here to trick me. They're trying to get me to pay. They're trying to get me to do something that's for the benefit of someone else. You kind of
Total
lost,
trespass.
yeah,
Total trespass. And I was like, if anyone should have learned this lesson by now, it's Meta, right? I was just like, there's definitely places where people are looking to connect with people. That's what they're looking for. Don't try to, like, what are you even doing trying to disintermediate that? Like, what is your vision that would lead you down? It makes people unnecessarily suspicious now of online interaction. I mean, maybe it's good. Maybe it's going to make everyone super paranoid about every person they interact with online, as maybe they should be going forward.
yeah,
It was just really disappointing because
yeah.
I think they're doing so much for open source. This just felt so off brand for them to have missed the
I
mark on
feel
that
like
particular feature.
they are starting to make the move to try to monetize and take benefit from it, and we're gonna see some lashback,
Yeah,
backlash,
exactly.
backwards.
Absolutely. So that's my BS. Your BS was about online experts. I think that this move, where anything with, especially these big, supposedly grown-up companies, who have we trust with our data, are not acting with transparency in AI and trying to like replace people and human interaction and connection. Ugh, gross.
That
Super annoying.
Yeah, yeah. That just makes everything harder for us. So we're trying to make something better.
Well, that is we're nearly at our last segment. Our last segment is plugs for the end of the call. Yu Ying, was there anything you wanted to plug this week that's coming up?
Well, I'm so glad you asked, Polly, because I have a newsletter on Substack and now also a version on LinkedIn that you can subscribe to, where I actually This week, I do the detailed breakdown of AI benchmarks if you want to see more detail of me ranting about that bullshit. It's Yuying's Substack for the Substack newsletter, or Gen AI Real Talk on LinkedIn. Love to see you on the newsletter. And for you, Polly?
I love Yuying's newsletter, and especially the benchmark breakdown this time was really insightful. It was exactly like what is in these benchmarks. So do check it out. I also have a newsletter now on LinkedIn, so do check me out on LinkedIn. Subscribe there, or check me out on aicareerboost.com. We have a monthly masterclass about the path to AI careers in product management, which I do for free. The next one's on May 15th. So sign up there and join us. It's always a lot of fun. And lastly, we always shamelessly plug the podcast. So if you enjoyed this, like, subscribe, give us some love on your podcast platform of preference. We'll love to hear from you. If you have any ideas of things that we should cover on the show, send it to support@aicareerboost.com. We'd love to hear your thoughts or the questions that you'd like to see answered. And that's been another episode of AI After Hours. Looking forward to drinking and talking AI with you again next month, Yuying.
Woo! Looking forward to seeing what you drink next time.